there. Welcome to the Culture Studios podcast. I'm Chad, and I'm here with
Lance.
And right before we start the episode, I want to make sure that you like, share, subscribe, do whatever you can to support us because, hey, we know that you're watching when you like and subscribe and share. We just know that you're there. And yeah, it's the only way we know that you're there. So this week, Lance, what do you want to talk about?
How you can jump to conclusions when somebody tells you something or doesn't tell you something.
Yes.
And it's not even leading anything. It can be family.
Yes.
Kid, does something you perceive they're doing something, you just unleash on them, and then you find out, you didn't have the full story. And how we, especially individuals who want to get something done, overachievers, whatever you want to label them, you jump to the gun, you jump your language, your words quickly, because your brain is perceiving things quickly. You're solving a problem, but most time, what do you think we have? Half the story, if that.
Sometimes not even half. Yeah,
and you can destroy one's feelings, their drive to stay on the team, by just unleashing too quickly.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of times, not only do we not have the story, we also don't know how a lot of times, it depends, because like if you work with somebody for 10, 15 years, then it's a lot easier to kind of like understand where they're coming from, because you can almost kind of be like, oh, like they're probably trying to protect me, or they're trying to protect this, or they're trying to do that. But if you've only worked with somebody 2, 3 years or even less, a lot of times it's hard to know, okay, where are they coming from an organizational standpoint, especially if it's in a business or whatever, but then also where are they coming from personally?
Right.
Because they may have dealt with someone that, a boss that maybe kind of abused their personality, like say they're a go-getter. Right. They had a boss that kind of abused that and used it, or they had someone that kind of downplayed, their ability. And so now a lot of where they're operating out of is coming from maybe a place of hurt, or maybe it's coming sometimes out of a place of success. Right. Because it's sometimes like, especially with a lot of people we deal with, it's like they're very successful maybe in their field, and so maybe we're not as familiar with their specific segment. So it's like, okay, well, like, oh, you're a specialist in this. Okay, and so like I don't need to know the whole story. And I think a lot of times we give certain people like that almost like validation of like, okay, I don't need to hold a story. But then when it comes to our family or people, we're like, hey, wait, don't make a decision without me. Like, hey, like, and it's funny because we'll trust somebody that like we see as a specialist, but then in our own family, with our own kids, with our own wife sometimes. So why'd you make that decision? Or like, wait, you left me out of it? And the whole time it's like, but you trust this random guy on a job, but you won't trust. And so I think that's been the real tension for me, is like, I think I've had to watch myself because I'll trust somebody that I know will like do audio well, right? Like I don't even need to hear it. There's times where I know like, hey, this guy's an audio specialist. Okay, I know the audio will be good. They'll put the headphones to me. I'm like, I don't even need to hear it. I know it's good. But then the wife's like, hey, I made the appointment for the kid, and you're like, well, we didn't talk about it,
right?
And it's like, but hey, she's the kid's mom,
right.
I shouldn't question, So I think that's where like the tension of like real life when it comes into your life is like, where are you almost kind of putting your loyalty and trust into, right? And where can you get better at it? And there are sometimes where you have to question things because some things become silly.
here's the interesting. We've all scrolled through social media. We're on here right now, but there's an expert in every field who has no employees, and they're like, 100%. You know what you need to do, and then you get ministers who are preaching business conferences, and they're like, all your employees need to be this way and this, and I don't put up with anything. And I'm like, have you seen the pool of employees nowadays? It's like people are coming in not knowing what to do. They're intimidated. I know one thing that I've had to work through is my strengths and weaknesses aren't their strengths and weaknesses. Sure. And so like when we had your sister through the summer of interning, I'm like, here, do this. And she's looked kind of paralyzed because she had never been entrusted, to just do something, and then we'll see where we're at. They're more task oriented, like here are all the puzzles, put it together. This
is the vision, and this is what we're wanting. And
you almost had all the puzzles put in a piece, and all you need is just to be applied and put together. And as we grow, we have to realize there's so many different layers to our abilities and weaknesses. And it's hard working through this environment of look, we probably need to know people's emotional state. In the 80s and 90s, it was like, whatever, just show up, you do it. And then you found out, oh, they were on the brink of divorce. So like, I think a good person, Christian, very transparent about it, was Jake Hamilton. Just finally saw success with Jesus Culture. The anthem songs coming out. And his wife's in the back room spilling her guts to Valentin about their marriage. Is like, she's like, I don't see my husband anymore. He's not talking to me about anything. He's driving the success of what he's working on. And you're just like, oh my goodness, like there's so much work in this life that we sometimes don't realize we have to put in, but we're not getting the full story.
Right.
Because we don't want to, or it's draining. And for me, it's draining. Like I'm that guy that has to sit there and be like, okay. I got to sit through a conversation.
Right. And that's why, like, when I present stuff to you, I present stuff very fast. As fast as I can.
But our minds work in the same field. Other people, they're in the details.
Yeah, sure.
I don't get lost in the details because I'm like, we're probably going to rediscuss it 10 more times.
Right.
So don't tell me the texture of this.
Funny, right? Because like I just pitched you a new redesign for the studio. Nobody at home is going to see it, but it's going to affect us. And I'm not telling you, oh, well, the wires are this and that. Well, we're going to run it like, I'm just explaining because I know, like, for you just need to know if it's going to work and also what it'll impact.
Right.
Because that's what I know, like, from you, okay, well, hey, it's going to displace X, Y, Z. Where is this going?
Right.
And then you're focused on how are we handling the displacement, not how are we, like, making it work, if that makes sense. So like that's how I know, like, working with you now, like I know, like, I don't need to tell you like, oh, well, this camera can't compatible with this cable. Like, you know, like I don't have to explain that to you because, like, you know, I'll just figure it out. But like when it comes to like physical, like, okay, hey, you know, hey, we have an office right now. Well, we're going to change that a little bit. Okay, well, what does that look like? That's the conversation we're having. It's like the fallout instead of the plan.
Right.
Because, you know, like, we'll handle the plan. You're looking at, okay, well, what are we doing?
You took my office that I needed. And I'm like, where's my office?
Exactly. And so that's kind of like the always the thing is like, when you're dealing with different people, you have to know like what their priority is.
Right.
Because a lot of times,
well, here, let's pick on Vinny since he's not here.
Yeah.
Super emotional. He's our office teddy bear.
Yeah, he is.
And it's like, if you don't validate that he cares, then they stop caring.
Yeah.
And I think in this world, we're all about this is how I do it.
Sure.
Everybody's telling you, oh, you should be a social media marketer. It's like, oh, yes, because it's just so easy to get in. You're going to make $200,000. And I think we don't have the full story, but going back to like the original thing is that it's easy to lose it on somebody. I'm sure you've had underlings that you're working with, especially volunteers.
Yeah.
You give them the direction, they come back and 10%'s done, or they've done it wrong.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Broke something. You're like,
in a lot of times what I've had to do now, when I was younger, it was always mad at them. But what I started getting mad at was my structure, my like realizing, oh, I didn't set you up for success. And now granted, I still will always be mad to this day, the freaking guardrails that we have to put up sometimes for some people. You're like, it's like playing bowling and you put the guardrails up and then it's like, oh, it doesn't have the right padding. Because this person just threw the bowling ball and they somehow managed to actually bounce it over across the entire thing. And now it like broke something.
Right.
Like, so now you're like, okay, well, now we have to have special absorbing padding. And we have to put, and so what I think happens is you have to be careful who you redirect your anger at. Because if you redirect it at a volunteer, well, that volunteer's gone. The volunteer's not going to stay around. But if you redirect it kind of at yourself or the system, then it's like, okay, there's something actionable I can do. I can fix the system.
Right.
Can't fix the person, but what's good is I can make that person feel like they belong. And then, because this is the biggest thing I think with volunteers and anybody like that, is you have to set them up for success. So if you're not building something that's going to set them up for success, then like you're ultimately setting them up for failure.
Right.
And so I think that's the kind of the thing we have to kind of juggle is like, did we set them up for success? If the answer is no, then we should never take anything out on them.
Right.
You know, I think that's
well, and you're in a new space of basically working from home remotely.
Yeah, sure.
It's super hard for me to write texts and emails, so I need phone calls. And then there's days where I'm just emotionally spent. I'm like, I don't know if I want to just get on the phone and talk
to
the social media person, because I've already like used all my creative space. But it's like, I decided to hire on. We've decided to cut budgets here and this. And so it's like a lot of times we get frustrated, but we don't take into account the whole story. And that's kind of the premise, is like, if we use God's wisdom to slow down, fully digest what's happening and look at the whole picture, we make better decisions. And then our team is more content. And it could just be you, the individual, working up to being part of a team, playing, running one day. But I think in this new, like, you either have people who are getting nothing done, or you have people that are extremely everywhere. And it's like, there's no middle ground anymore. I found out. And so the guys that are getting a lot done, communication is so important. But getting it across that people understand.
Oh, for sure.
Because we've lost the era, bouncing football. We've lost the era of that hard-nosed coach. You look at Miami, you got this prodigy. And it's just working. But he seems very communicating. You see the coach over at the Rams. And we've lost that, like, I'm just going to be that knuckle down, scream at the guys.
Well, I remember there was, Nick Saban, right? Prolific college coach. And there was a story about when he went to the NFL, he went to Miami, and he yelled at some guy, right? And that guy's response to him was, "Well, I make more than you do in a year. Like I'm worth more than you to this team than you are to this team." Like, and just immediately like sized him down. And Saban went right back to the college, and now he's incredibly successful. But the way in which he was talking to these kids and stuff, it worked in a college arena. And now, but here's the thing, now it doesn't work in the college arena, because now there's the nil deals where they're getting paid all this money, so they can go transfer someone else and actually make money. So now we're starting to see this whole shift. And so that's a great point, is like, these hard-nosed coaches, they used to be successful. And then and that was the biggest thing, is why couldn't the college coach transition into the NFL? Well, because you're obviously the recruiting and all that, but also the way that you talk to your players is completely different, because you have a guy making $30 million a year and you're making, $10 million as a coach, $5 million as a coach. It's like, hey, like, I know I'm sticking around. I don't know about you. And so I think that's kind of always the thing. And so the coaches that stay a long time are the ones that can figure out how to be a player's coach. And that's the thing, I think, with us, is we have to realize, like, how do we, especially in the ministry, how do we become people that are like relatable and actually like care about the people that we're next to, volunteers and stuff like that, is, and so I think a lot of times when I'm kind of navigating things, I'm like, okay, because I look at like what we've done here, we got to the heart of what we wanted to do, right? So we did a lot of things. We did one podcast, we're doing this stuff. What we did is we took a hammer to everything and said, okay, if we stopped doing everything, what was the core of what we wanted? What was the dream? What was the thing? Well, we wanted to affect culture. We wanted to, give people things that they can, take and ingest into their life. So it's like, okay, what are we doing that can be successful? What are we not doing that's successful? And then what are we doing that's being detrimental? And so what we did is we went through a large pruning. I mean, I said probably a year and a half of trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And then kind of reformed, and what we did was we didn't change, we just put emphasis on the things that mattered. And so I think that's a lot of times too, when you're talking about volunteers, when you're talking about workers, if you're not putting an emphasis as a leader on things that matter, how are they supposed to know? Like, how are they supposed to know what matters
the vision
when there's no emphasis? And so I think one thing that we've done is, like you said, we've done some different changes and things because we realized what our emphasis was on. And so now we've made this whole shift in saying, okay, this is what we need to put an emphasis on. And so what that did is everything is now non-traditional. Everything. Because that's what we're trying to reach, the non-traditional. And so everything we're doing is non-traditional. And so what we were trying to do was honestly, in the very beginning, we were trying to operate as a traditional business. If you look back, it was traditional 9 to 5, come in, do some work, pitch, do this, try to build it. And it was like, that's not, because those weren't the type of people we're trying to reach in that sense. So what we started doing is we started changing all the stuff. And so
I don't even know if it's non like the contemporary style. It's when you come from a business world into ministry, it's a different format in the sense that like it may work in the business world, but it doesn't work in ministry. And it's interesting because you don't see very well ministry people transition well into the business world. No. And it takes a learning season. And then you add media, which is the arts, and you're trying, and it's a lot of, we got to try this. We don't blame the guys that created Twitter that took 7-8 years to figure out the format. We don't blame the media techs that are trying, but in ministry space, we're like, you haven't got that off the ground yet. And it's like, Christ said, I'm going to prune you so that you can come back, like you said, with better fruit. Yeah. But to the public's eye, you're just a failure. You're wasting money. Right. What are you doing over there? Yeah. And it's like, but the Bible says, if you're doing a good thing, I'm gonna prune you back so you can do something better. Yeah. Today's product is better.
Oh, so much better.
And where we're gonna be in the next quarter, right? And what we're putting out. And it's like, we say this all the time. Well, when you guys see what we're doing, because we typically work probably a quarter, we're a quarter out for what you see aired. Always. And so, people are like, oh, and we're like, we know where we're headed because we've already put the legwork in. Yeah. But it takes time, takes communication. It's so much in play. Yeah. And in this world, if we're not communicating, things get destroyed quickly. Yeah. And you got to be careful who you, and I think that's another thing is who you communicate with.
100%.
Because, there's this new saying that's going around in our kitchen where I volunteer on Sundays. It's like, hyenas don't run with lions. Like, you don't want to get caught up in a bunch of barking, lost animals. Sure. Because lions are out roaming, killing, taking the ground and securing it. Yeah. What are hyenas known for? Yeah. Just a loud mouth, crybabies. Yeah. And it's like, if you start to associate who you're with as them, maybe it's time to start getting next to the lions. Sure. But you got to know who you're running with and communicating with. And so it's a new era. And I think we're finding out really quick who's adjusting and not adjusting.
Sure. I mean, because you look at with us right now, it's funny because if you look at 2023, when we started, we had 3 shows going. Right? So Culture Show at that point was dead. Right. So we had our CA podcast. We had our Tuesday show. Which was the encouragement show, and then we had with you and Alexis, and then we had Alexis Speak Live. Right. Those are the 3 shows we were running. This year, going into January, we'll have 6, probably 7. Right. Going into January. So to think we doubled and won. Right. And what's crazy about it is we'll have 2 out of office shows with probably more on the way. But it's one of those things of our vision started shifting from just inside this house, inside of like all the people that we know locally, and now going, okay, well, we have a vision bigger. Right. And the thing though is me and you had that conversation in 2022. Right. About, hey, content house, reaching outside, like whole thing. But it wasn't really in the 2023 that we got this stuff rolling. Right. Because of how people just don't understand the back end to it, but also like getting the people that we were working with on a day-to-day basis on board with that. Right. And so I think, and then also going out and getting other people and courting other people and getting them on board, because that stuff takes time.
Oh my goodness. I put the feelers out to 10 people. 3 of them didn't even return the text. And all 10 still aren't doing shows. Yep. So it's like one of these, there's a fear out there. It's like, oh my gosh, everybody's doing it. No, they're not. No. And then the ones that are wanting to put in the work. And I was telling Vinny, I was like, we got to start a count because we're going to hit 1,000 shows out of this studio. Yeah. Probably, if not by the end of next year. Yeah. Because if we're doing 7 shows a week. Yeah. And you add that into 50, that's 350. We'll be close to 400 shows next year out of the studio.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. And to think we had 3 overheads.
But you're not really doing anything.
No,
we're not,
But the funny thing is, and once again, like, on the last CA episode, we explained that's just the studio.
Right.
Where everything else that we're doing outside of in culture.
Oh my gosh, mission trips.
Yeah.
All the street evangelism.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much more going on. There's stuff that you're going to be launching with the Culture Academy. And so like when you start breaking down, like there's so much more going on. But the funny thing is the studio itself will eclipse everything we've done in the umbrella of Culture Architects alone. So like you think then when you add the mission, you add we're going to be doing in 2024, the stuff that we'll be doing and have done is going to be wild. Looking back at where we started.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, where it all boils down to is, you know, I think we had to understand where we were coming from. And going back to the original thing is, you know, I was doing things in preparation for where we are now back in the beginning. Because I was going, okay, wait, why are we doing this?
Right.
Why are we? And I was boiling things down. We, you know, all the way back to, you know, when you guys were doing the podcast with the headset, you know, the crazy headphones. It's like there were things that, okay, well, hey, you know, why don't we do this? And there were things that we were testing, the live shows. Like there's things that we've learned, and like the whole time it was like we had to trust each other.
But that's actually a good spot to like kind of pick apart. Is that a lot of times someone will bring you an idea. They're not paid. They're not the one in charge.
Sure.
And you just knock it. You're like, who are you to tell me what to do? And if you don't take your team's advice and chew on it for at least more than a 10 seconds, you're not broadening your ability, because now you're only working off of your influence. Like we're wearing headphones because that's what you do.
Yeah.
Why? I don't really know, because we were 6 feet from each other.
Yeah.
We could hear it, but it was like everybody at that time for some reason was wearing them.
Sure.
And it's just what you did until somebody was like, you know, you don't have to. And you're like, oh, I didn't, you know, and it's like looking back, it was the dumbest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But we listened, we heeded to your advice. Was it life-changing? No, but it led to the evolution of where we are here today, because we made small, incremental, like when we did the first big set, it was great.
Yeah.
Then we looked at it 6 months later and we're like, we look like a news channel.
Yeah. We built a news channel.
And we're running 3 shows on one set. They all are becoming, they're all gray. No one knows what we're, and so
anonymous.
And so it's being willing to swallow your pride and be like, okay.
And by the way, at that point we had no space.
Right. Yeah, that was the running theme. we need a bigger building.
Yeah, we need a bigger building. And the funniest thing is now, you know, probably going into 2024, we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets.
Right.
And we had only space for 1 set, maybe.
Right.
And so I think it's funny because when you start dissecting, because that's the biggest thing is, I think when you're wanting to grow, you grow.
Right.
And I think that's what we really found out really fast is what area we were wanting to grow in was the area we'd grow in. So at one point we were a shirt company and we were growing in that area. But I think there was a turn, and you talked about it in the CA podcast, the final one. But you know, there was a turn eventually where it was like, okay, yes, I enjoy making graphics, and you enjoyed making that stuff, but it was like it's not getting us anywhere,
right?
And so then it was like, okay, well, we're gonna redirect, and so now the effort in the growth, we were swinging in that direction. You took and we swung it in a different direction. Because I think that was the thing is there was, let's be honest, there was a point where shirts were a priority. We were running, I mean, ads. I made like 90 days worth of ads. Like we weren't really focusing on the shows.
Right.
You know, there was a period where we didn't film a show for like 7 weeks.
Well, we thought we could do both. In reality, is we couldn't do both well.
No.
And what just kind of popped in my brain was the ultimate advisor to one's life should be the Holy Spirit. And it came through just one morning where he's like, you need to be done.
Yep.
And I didn't go like, but why God? Like you gave me these ideas. A creative person should never say like, you gave me these ideas, so I need to hold, like, no, you're just creative. You're going to go create anywhere, everywhere.
Right.
And a lot of times I think God's trying to lead us to the next level, but we don't like that, what he's saying. And so we go, no, this is what you gave me. I need to be known as this. Man, I'm thankful that we launched Brian. He's doing, you know, his thing. We have so much more space. I have a lot more space in my brain. I have ability to like, actually put time into things that I shouldn't say matter, but they matter to this house, what we're trying to do. Because you can't, there's only so much time.
Right.
And I think ultimately you got to be ready when the Lord says go.
Right.
Or stop.
Yeah.
We like go. We don't like stop.
For sure.
But because we stopped, we were able to go farther than we ever thought we could.
And the thing too is like everything we did when we were kind of making this transition with everything in the umbrella and the different is we had to take a second and go, okay, it was almost kind of a shut it all down moment where it was like, okay, I think a lot of times everything was non-negotiable. Like everything had to keep running. And so it was like, you know what, wait, let's shut some things down. Let's end some things. And then we'll kind of go in this rebirth as we start figuring out because we didn't need to figure out what we were doing. We need to figure out how we were going to do it.
Right.
And so I think that was the thing, is getting on the same page with everybody and being like, okay, hey, this is the plan. We're gonna kill these 2 shows. We're gonna rebirth. We're gonna do this. We're gonna bring it back more intentionally. And so it was like what we were doing, because the truth is we could have continued both shows, but what we realized is we needed some time off from those shows to almost palate cleanse ourselves,
right?
And then go, okay, hey, this is a whole new era,
right?
Because what we're gonna be launching in November, in December, in January. It's like that stuff wouldn't have been possible if we just kept going.
Right.
And so, and then we brought other people on that are kind of assisting us in different lay areas. And that was the thing is like, we needed that assistance more than we needed like other things that we thought we needed.
Right.
And so I think that's the thing is I think all of us had to have this mental change where it almost took like I know people say 180, but it was almost like 360 because we're right back where we were.
Yeah.
But it's a completely different, because we did that whole 360 trip around and then we go, okay, everything's good now. Because I think the biggest thing that we did is we unlocked this building.
Yes.
And I mean, you think about what it was. You walked in here and was like, there's no room for anything. We got rooms packed full of like the room that's 2 studios now. I mean, was y'all's offices at one point, but then it was storage area where you could barely walk in there.
Right.
So, well, where are we going to put all this stuff? And then the other area over here that's now storage, that was packed.
Right.
And then there was another whole section where we had shelves and like up to the ceiling. And so it was like, well, what are we going to do?
Right.
This was storage. Like, it was like, and so I think what we started doing is we started realizing what priorities were, but then also all being on the same page.
Yeah.
Because that was the biggest thing is like, it may not be a priority to me, but if it's a priority to you, then we have to, it's a priority until it's no longer a priority.
Right.
And so like once everyone's priorities started, like we started talking, because that's the biggest thing is communication. And going back to the very beginning, it's like, you don't have all the information until you have all the information.
Right.
And so I can start working with all the information, but if I don't share it with you, you don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Because you're operating onto the old information.
Right.
So like if I, started coming in here and we did it, is like start moving stuff around, start doing other sets. You're like, well, hey, we don't have room for that. So, oh yeah, we do. We're going to kill X, Y, Z. And you're like, oh, that makes total sense. Like, yeah, we don't need that anymore. Let's get rid of it. Because, hey, that opens up now 2 studios.
Right.
So, hey, if we put walls up, we can make this room 2 studios. So then we start doing all this crazy stuff. And then it realized like, all that was actually limiting us in the end was what was here.
Right.
So then it took us going, hey, what's here doesn't have to be here.
Correct.
So then we started challenging kind of the reality of things, and that's how we kind of got to today. That's how we get to almost 7 different studios. It's like that's how we get there. Is we start challenging the reality of things.
But you got to take those chances. And nobody loves the inner room, the especially Vinny, sadly. He's the, oh my goodness, how am I going to get it done?
Yeah.
But I noticed I'm out working, plowing, contacting. My mind's not thinking about, hey, what can we do with the boardroom?
Sure.
Like where you're editing.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about like, oh, the office is not really being utilized to its full potential. But we got guys like you. Then we got guys like Vinny who's like, oh, I'll execute this. Right. I'll make this happen. But it's like when you utilize your team and you let them be a part and get all of the thoughts out without, because prior guys would have half a sentence and I'm like, okay, done. I don't need to hear anymore. But there was still more meat on the bone.
Sure.
And it's getting enough wisdom to say, okay, slow down. Let everybody say their piece. And then we'll kind of like build a plan from there.
Yeah.
But I think go-getters, they just want to go.
Sure.
And I think running without a plan is so detrimental. Yep. Not understanding why something wasn't being able to execute.
Right.
I remember one time I was like, where are they at? And they're like, somebody's in the hospital. It's like, thank goodness I didn't unleash, holy hell and be like, I can't believe you. I'm paying you here. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, there's a reason.
You look like a scumbag jumping to a conclusion because of all of these and so it's like, take into account what's going on, get the full story, then say what you need to say. But, it'll save a lot of heartache, especially if you're married.
Yeah.
Especially if you're married.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, no, that's a big deal for sure. So
this is good, man.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week.